Buenas noches o buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Mónica Meléndez, soy la directora del Centro de Idiomas de la Universidad Ricardo Palma y para mí es un placer y una alegría estar con ustedes hoy día, primero hablando en español porque luego tenemos que pasar en unos minutos al idioma inglés para el evento que nos convoca. El día de hoy en el mundo se celebra la noche de Harry Potter. Desde hace ya más de 5, 6, 7 años inició esta celebración en Inglaterra, propiciada principalmente por la editorial Bloomsbury. Y en ese momento quisiera que quien me acompaña en el backstage, Erika, por favor, si pudiéramos empezar a compartir el PPT. Nosotros a partir de este año nos estamos sumando a la Harry Potter Book Night, que es así como se llama, hashtag HP, hashtag HP o hashtag Harry Potter Book Night, cualquiera de ellos. El año pasado, para estas fechas, también llevamos a cabo un evento relacionado a Harry Potter y nos animamos este año nuevamente a ser parte de la celebración que están llevando a cabo todas las librerías en nuestro país y las librerías en el mundo. Propiciamos y los invitamos siempre a los estudiantes de nuestros diversos cursos de inglés, francés, portugués y quechua y en todas nuestras conferencias a leer por diversas razones. Porque nos da entretenimiento, nos da placer, porque nos relaja, porque en el caso de inglés, al leer en inglés también, esta exposición al idioma nos permite afianzar y consolidar nuestra práctica, nuestro conocimiento y con ello mejorar nuestro dominio del idioma. Harry Potter es una saga muy larga, quizás hemos llegado a ella primero a través de las películas, que son una adaptación de las historias originales escritas por J.K. Rowling. Y para hablar de la saga y de momentos específicos y elementos específicos de ella, tenemos al profesor José Castro, quien ya se encuentra con nosotros, a quien le damos la bienvenida y vamos a presentarlo ya en inglés. Si podemos pasar al abstract, por favor, Erika. Muchas gracias. Quisiera comentarles antes de ver el abstract que nosotros estamos iniciando nuestras clases el 14 de febrero. En el verano siempre ofrecemos cursos intensivos porque sabemos que ustedes tienen un poquito más de tiempo y quieren alcanzar más rápido sus metas de dominio de idiomas. Contamos con inglés, como ven acá, francés, portugués y quechua, con clases desde las 7 de la mañana hasta las 10:30 de la noche. Yo hago un pequeño detalle con respecto a cada uno de estos idiomas en este momento. En el caso de quechua, el curso está subsidiado. Nosotros pagamos solo 4 cuotas de 100 soles cada cuota y si queremos pagar todo el curso, hay un descuento. Les incluimos el material y nuestras clases son vía Zoom. Zoom es sumamente ligero, va a hacer que sus clases sean rápidas, sean fáciles de seguir. En el caso de francés, portugués y también en el caso de quechua, incluimos elementos de la cultura que hacen que ustedes puedan comprender el idioma y aprender de la cultura a sí mismo. Y en el caso de inglés, que son la mayor cantidad de clases con las que contamos, a partir de este año los estudiantes de inglés 6 van a tomar el examen TOEFL ITP de manera gratuita. Eso quisiera compartirles hoy con respecto a nuestros cursos. Inglés es lo que nos convoca hoy día, así que vamos a empezar con el abstract de la sesión que tenemos hoy día. To celebrate the occasion of Harry Potter Book Night, roll up for a magical tour filled with fantastic creatures and enchanted gadgets that will take you anywhere you want to go in the wizarding world of Harry Potter as depicted in Muggle-made paper and screen. We understand you are not a professor at Hogwarts, or you are, no, you're not. But we guarantee this presentation will prove to you why your Muggle-born students are better off reading the Harry Potter book series. Hopefully, we will also show you are missing out by not reading the books yourself. So yeah, I agree with that. We might be missing something, some fun in our lives if we do not read the Harry Potter saga. Mr. Castro, as described in his biodata, is a longtime fan of the Harry Potter saga, a hobby he's proud to have initiated his 7-year-old daughter into. That's a nice habit, the habit of reading. He holds a bachelor's degree in education and started teaching English 22 years ago. In addition to his passion for reading, he also has a passion for writing. He has written English language articles and restaurant reviews for culinary magazines and websites, while his Spanish language articles and reviews have been published in magazines and websites both in Spain and in Peru. So not the culinary side of his professional life, but the side of being a reader and a writer is what brought to Mr. Castro to us today. Why are we holding the session in English? Today and tomorrow, there are many events and online and face-to-face conferences held or that are going to be held in different parts of Lima. This is the only one that is being held in English because we have, fortunately, someone who is a fan and who is very well acquainted with these books as well as with the movies. And because we want to increase your exposure to the language with this, and we are advocates for reading Harry Potter, and advocates for creating the conditions for you to learn English and to achieve your advanced level as fast and as easy as possible. Thank you, Mr. Castro, for being here with us. Thank you for being so patient. I've taken more than the 5 minutes I said I would take. The floor is yours. We're going to start by giving you a warm round of applause. I forgot to say, if you let me speak, your mic is off, by the way, that we are going to end the session with a raffle. I don't know, Erica, if we can show the picture of what is going to be raffled. At the end of the conference, we are going to raffle these 3 books. These 3 books are in English. They are the the Bloomsbury edition of, help me out with the names of the first 3 titles, Mr. Castro, the ones that you're holding right now.
I have Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. They're right here. I have them here, right? Then Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and then Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Thank you so much. So they will be raffled at 6:55. So without further ado, let's get started with our session. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. Now, I want to see if I can, yeah, there it is. So this is our presentation tonight. Thank you to everybody that's watching right now, that's tuning in. And of course, thank you to Idiomas Ricardo Palma and Ricardo Palma University for giving me this great opportunity to spend an hour or so talking about something I enjoy. And I think it's kind of a pattern in my life where I spend time talking about things I enjoy. And this is one of the things that I enjoy greatly, which is reading. And in this case, the Harry Potter book night is a great opportunity, again, to revisit episodes, scenes, stories inside the story. All right. And so this presentation is entitled Harry Potter Book Night, How to Journey Around the Wizarding World, right? And we're going to start talking about the beasts that are presented, depicted in books and movies, and that are used for transport, right? Because basically, as Ms. Melendez was saying, Harry Potter Book Night started in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. All right, and every year there's a name for a Harry Potter Book Night. There's like a theme, and again, if I'm not mistaken, the theme or the name for Harry Potter Book Night 2022 is A Magic Journey. So I wanted to take advantage of the name Journey and focus on how the wizards and witches of the Harry Potter book world or the Harry Potter universe travel. How do they travel? How do they journey through this universe of magic? So one of these means to travel is the use of some beasts, which appear both in books and movies. And we start, for example, talking about the Thestral. I love a lot the concept of the Thestral because it shows some sort of imagery. It sort of represents how a person's life is touched deeply, is moved by the event of somebody else's death. As you can see on the screen, only a person who has witnessed death can see a Thestral. And a Thestral is, by the way, one of 4 kinds of winged horses in the Harry Potter universe or in the wizarding world. I also have to say, by the way, that I've read the books many times. I've also watched the movies many times. But I'm only becoming familiar with the Fantastic Beasts movie series. We remember there's one book, right? Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, also written by J.K. Rowling, but fictionally written by Newt Scamander, which is also the main character in the movies. So this Thestral is native to the British Isles, and that's why there are many in England or in the United Kingdom, according to the fiction, of course. And if you don't mind, I like to read a passage from the book which gives us a lot of detail about the appearance of this fantastic beast, as it actually is, the Thestral. So I'm going to start with, let me see, I have this here on the screen. Bear with me, I'm going to start reading a passage from the book Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. A pair of blank, white, shining eyes were growing larger through the gloom, and a moment later, the dragonish face, neck, and then skeletal body of a great black winged horse emerged from the darkness. It looked around at the class for a few seconds, swishing its long black tail, then bowed its head and began to tear flesh from the dead cow with its pointed fangs. A great wave of relief broke over Harry. Here at last was proof that he had not imagined these creatures, that they were real. Hagrid knew about them too. He looked eagerly at Ron, but Ron was still staring around into the trees, and after a few seconds, he whispered, "Why doesn't Hagrid call again?" Most of the rest of the class were wearing expressions as confused and nervously expectant as Ron's, and were still gazing everywhere but at the horse standing feet from them. There were only 2 other people who seemed to be able to see them. A stringy, slithering boy standing just behind Goyle was watching the horse eating with an expression of great distaste on his face, and Neville, whose eyes were following the swishing progress of the long black tail. So as we can see here, and as we can recall in the movie, only Luna Lovegood can see the Thestrals. But in the book, we learned that also Neville Longbottom and one Slytherin boy that is mentioned, we don't know the name, the name is not mentioned in the book, can also see the Thestrals. The Thestrals, which will reappear again in the last book and also the last movie, during the scene where they take Harry Potter from his house, his uncle and aunt's house, to, if I'm not mistaken, to the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. You will remember that scene where everybody drinks a polyjuice potion and they disguise themselves as Harry Potter. I think it was the scene of the 9 Harry Potters. So this was our first creature used to travel. Wizards and witches have used Thestrals, in this case, to fly. Another flying creature is a hippogriff. And here is, for example, one opportunity to make an argument in favor of the books over the movies. In the movies, we see only one hippogriff, right? And its name, by the way, is Buckbeak. But in the book, during that Care of Magical Creatures lesson that Hagrid is teaching, he brings, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 hippogriffs to class. Of course, all of the students were watching in awe at these 7 unknown creatures for them. The hippogriff, by the way, is the name hippogriff is a mix of hippo, in this case horse, and griff for griffin. The griffin is a very similar creature, also existing in the wizarding world and also in mythology, where the rear part of this creature is not a horse, but of a lion. So that would be the griffin, mix of giant eagle and lion, and this is the hippogriff, mixed of a giant eagle and a horse. As you can see, the hippogriff is native to Europe. And I would also like to read that part of the book. In this case, the name of the book is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Trotting toward them were a dozen of the most bizarre creatures Harry had ever seen. So I was very mistaken. It's not 6 or 7 hippogriffs. There's a dozen hippogriffs in this particular chapter in the book Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. They had the bodies, hind legs, and tails of horses, but the front legs, wings, and heads of what seemed to be giant eagles, with cruel, steel-colored beaks and large, brilliantly orange eyes. The talons on their front legs were half a foot long and deadly looking. Each of the beasts had a thick leather collar around its neck, which was attached to a long chain, and the ends of all these were held in the vast hands of Hagrid, who came jogging into the paddock behind the creatures. "Get up here!" he roared, shaking the chains and urging the creatures toward the fence where the class stood. Everyone drew back slightly as Hagrid reached them and tethered the creatures to the fence. "Hippogriffs!" Hagrid roared happily, waving a hand at them. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Harry could sort of see what Hagrid meant. Once you got over the first shock of seeing something that was half horse, half bird, you started to appreciate the hippogriff's gleaming coats, changing smoothly from feather to hair, each of them a different color: stormy gray, bronze, pinkish roan, gleaming chestnut, and inky black. It's also one of my favorite illustrations in think I gotta show you here. This one, if you allow me to show you, is part of the collection of books illustrated by Jim Kay. This is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets in Spanish over here, right? This is Spanish, actually. This is the ones we got to read for my daughter. And in these beautiful illustrations, for example, of course, in the other book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, you can see the different hippogriffs in different colors. Not this one, of course. Like I said, this is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by Jim Kay. We also got Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, also illustrated by Jim Kay. And we have learned just recently that the 5th book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, illustrated by Jim Kay, is coming out this year. All right, so I think another argument that we can make in favor of the books over, or in this case, I would say, over the books in English, over the books in Spanish, especially if you are teaching English, if you are learning English, is the way J.K. Rowling writes Hagrid. When she writes Hagrid and when she writes Hagrid lines, she spells English in such a particular way that we can hear Hagrid's accent. I think that's fantastic to begin with. When we have books that have been translated from another language into Spanish, we always lose that. That's what gives origin to the expression lost in translation. And if you read, for example, I've read the books in English and Spanish, and in Spanish, of course, for my daughter. And that's when you say, yeah, Hagrid is just like another character, right? But when you read Hagrid in English, like I said, you can hear him. You can hear his rough accent, his sort of undereducated way of talking. And now I want to say again, it's fantastic in how J.K. Rowling chooses Hagrid and makes him more human. We know Hagrid is half human, half giant, but I think the way he talks, all right, makes him more enjoyable, endearable for everybody, for all the readers. So we finished talking about the beasts. Even though we have one more beast coming later, we're going to talk about the gadgets now. The gadgets that are used for traveling in the wizarding world. And we want to begin talking about the portkey, or the several portkeys that appear in the movies, that appear in the book, and that are presented first in the book Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. We might remember the scene where Mr. Weasley and his children, we're talking about the twins, the Weasley twins, Ronald, and also his daughter, Ginny, almost missed the name. And then Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, all of them are walking over a hill and they start looking for something. Because a portkey is actually any object already in existence that is transformed into a portkey using the portkey spell, which is just saying, of course, you need a wand for that. I forgot to bring up my wand here, right? And you touch it and you would say Portus. Of course, you don't need a pencil, you need a wand. And you need to be a particular professionally trained wizard or witch and not a muggle. It's myself. You say, again, Portus. And you'll be transforming this magic mouse, for example, into a portkey. And of course, the destination will be predetermined. We remember this scene then when they all get around this old boot and they go next to the pitch where they're going to play the Quidditch World Cup. I also have a fragment here, but I think I'm going to skip it. All right, I want to concentrate maybe a little bit more on some other aspects of the portkey. We remember, for example, that the Triwizard Cup was also a portkey that took Harry and Cedric to this place, if I'm not mistaken, cemetery, where Voldemort is going to be reincarnated again. He's going to be given a new body through the dark magic of Wormtail. And after Cedric's death, I think we forgot to say spoiler alert, right? From the beginning of this session. But after Cedric's death, Harry Potter touches Cedric and at the same time touches the Triwizard Cup, and they go back to Hogwarts, more specifically to the outside of the maze. We also can mention this kettle, the kettle that we have in the picture, that is used also in the Order of the Phoenix when Mr. Weasley is attacked by the giant snake, Nagini. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
So the prop team has brought me my wand, right? And so now I have a wand. Now I can say Portus. And so I was saying Mr. Weasley was attacked by Nagini in the Order of the Phoenix. And while at Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore turns a kettle into a portkey, and so the Weasleys and Harry Potter go to Grimmauld Place to see Mr. Weasley. There's also this punctured soccer ball that is also mentioned in the books. Like I said, anything could really be a portkey. There's even a scene with a portkey in the Fantastic Beasts movies. The broomsticks, yeah. You know, one of the things that really took me by surprise the first time I watched the movies, and I must say that I first watched a Harry Potter movie and then I started reading. And in the end, I finished reading the whole series of books before the final movies were released. I was really surprised by the fact that wizards and witches in the wizarding world didn't really use broomsticks to travel a lot. They were basically shown in Quidditch games. It was like a broomstick. It was just like, by comparison, a tennis racket, a golf club. So the broomstick is something that you need essentially to play a sport. Again, like a racket or a club. You cannot play tennis without a tennis racket. You cannot play golf without a golf club. So you need a broomstick to play Quidditch. Otherwise, you can't play. But it's almost at the end of the book series. In this case, in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when we see the use of broomsticks, again, in this scene I've already mentioned, where several characters take Polyjuice Potion and transform themselves into Harry Potter. So they travel with broomsticks. There are also 2 Thestrals, and there's also the famous flying motorbike that used to belong to Sirius Black. Since he died, of course, the flying motorbike belonged to Hagrid. Now, in the movies and also in the books, we can see 3 different manufacturers of broomsticks. There are in total 6 different manufacturers of broomsticks, and you can find a lot more about them when you read the other books published also by J.K. Rowling, as, for example, Quidditch Through the Ages, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I saw it in one bookstore here in Lima, already available. Quidditch Through the Ages. In fact, one book that Hermione gives to Ronald Weasley as a present. And here, coming to our last section of this presentation, we're going to talk about these means of transportation, means of flying, means of getting places that are very particular, very peculiar. It was kind of difficult to really sort them, to really classify them. Starting with a flying car. A flying car, which in the movies is depicted as a Ford Anglia, but in the books, you never really get to know what kind of car it is. Of course, we can imagine it's an old car, but for the movies, it's a Ford Anglia. Perhaps it was a form of product placement. For the people that don't know what product placement is, it's just this sort of marketing strategy that some brands, companies, manufacturers talk to movie producers, movie directors, and say, hey, wouldn't you like to showcase one of my products in your movie? Famous examples of product placement is the pair of Nike sneakers that Marty McFly, for example, wears in the Back to the Future movies. And also the Pepsi that Marty McFly also orders through different movies, different Back to the Future movies. So it could be a form of product placement to have a Ford Anglia, which became very popular after the movie was released. A lot of people were really interested in getting Ford Anglias, even though they were old cars. Now, of course, this flying car was first just an ordinary car made by muggles. And that's what makes it peculiar. That's what makes it an oddity on this list. It's a muggle-made artifact used now by wizards and witches. The same happens with the Hogwarts Express. It is said that the Hogwarts Express is also muggle-made. They bought the locomotive, they bought the train, and then they had to erase memories so that nobody would remember who bought it. They would remember they sold it, but they wouldn't remember who bought it. And then there was this kind of the record-breaking concealment charm, right? You may notice, for example, and that's the magic of the books, because the books explain a lot more about certain things. In the first book, we have, for example, the Leaky Cauldron. The Leaky Cauldron is a pub, a bar, especially for witches and wizards. And the book describes how regular people, muggles, walk in front of the Leaky Cauldron, and it's like it's not there. They never even look at it. They never notice it. So the Leaky Cauldron is there, but muggles can see it. So it's the same kind of charm or enchantment. They have to run over miles, or kilometers in this case, or British English, so that the Hogwarts Express couldn't be seen by muggles. Also, and I think this is mentioned in Hogwarts: A History, a book always championed by Hermione Granger, that the Hogwarts Express opened in the early 20th century or late 19th century. I should double check that part of the story. Before that, before the inaugural ride of the Hogwarts Express, everybody had to go to Hogwarts Castle through different means: broomsticks, flue powder, different ways. Oh, and this is an important fact here. The Hogwarts Express operates only 4 times a year. The first time of the year is always September 11, when they go to Hogwarts from King's Cross Station. Then from Hogwarts, from Hogwarts, in this case from Hogsmeade Station, back to King's Cross. And this is for Christmas, for all students that want to spend Christmas with their families. Then the third time again after Christmas, after the festivities, from King's Cross to Hogsmeade. And then, of course, at the end of the year, for everybody to leave Hogwarts and return to King's Cross for vacation. Now, of all the different ways of moving, of traveling, I think the fireplace is a very amazing one. It's really fascinating how they travel through fireplaces, from one fireplace to another, just by naming the name of the destination, just by naming this destination, which also had to have a fireplace. We remember this scene when Harry Potter sort of chokes with flue powder, and instead of saying diagonally, he says diagonally, which is shown in the movies. In the translation, that part is very funny, gets lost again, right? And it's funny because there's also the counterpart for diagonally, which is nocturne alley. And so instead of diagonally, it would be nocturnally. And again, the linguistics management of J.K. Rowling is really also something I admire her for. Another characteristic of the fireplace, in this case, through the use of flue powder, is communication. You could basically look into somebody else's house just by placing your head, only your head, in the fireplace, into the fire, and then your head would show up at a great distance into another fireplace. We remember those scenes of Sirius Black talking to Harry Potter in one of the fireplaces in Hogwarts, for example. And I think I'm going to end this part now, talking about apparition. One more time, I have to mention this game that J.K. Rowling plays with words. She doesn't mention appear or appearance. So the verb is not appear, the noun is not appearance, the verb is apparate, and the noun is apparition. Of course, to apparate, first you needed to disapparate. So first you had to perform this apparition, not a disappearance, a disapparition, and then you would perform apparition someplace else. And it's also this parallel between students who are 17 years old taking the apparition tests in order to get their apparition license, while muggles, also who are 17 years old in Western civilization and in many places, in many countries, would take their driving tests, which would allow them to drive legally. It's a funny thing because Harry Potter never takes the apparition license test in the books nor in the movies. We can suspect that he does it later, all right, after Voldemort is gone. We can guess that he took the apparition license test after that. And here I think is where I'm going to skip some slides here, which I think is very important for this particular case when we are talking to teachers and learners. Why are Harry Potter books helpful for English teachers and English learners? We can say first that most of students around the world, but of course we can focus also in Peru, have read the Harry Potter books, depending on their age, of course, in Spanish. So if they read the books in Spanish and if they are willing, if we motivate them to read the books again, but this time in English, they're not gonna get lost. There are many times when students start reading books in English, they've never read the books before, and they get completely lost. They get frustrated, they just stop reading, they don't feel motivated at all. But since many, we cannot say most, if many students have read the books in Spanish in their mother tongue, then it's going to be very easy for them to start reading the same books in their original language, which, by the way, doesn't have many complex grammar structures. That also helps students, especially if you start reading books 1, 2, 3, then later on it gets a little more sophisticated, but just enough, not too much. Of course, there's also the opportunity of vocabulary. Some people might argue, but my students are exposed to American English, and Harry Potter books are written in British English. Remember, there are still American versions or American editions of Harry Potter, which basically concentrate on the spelling of words. They don't really change the vocabulary. But just by adapting the spelling, that's already a big help. I would also say that the characters all of the characters in the Harry Potter universe or in the Wizarding world are very easy to relate to. Many people will feel identified not only with the characters but with the different experiences the characters go through. And of course, going from puberty to adolescence, the first kiss, first love, first crush, first infatuation. There are many, many things, many opportunities where students, readers are going to feel identified, they're going to relate very easily with the characters. And I think we can already say thank you. I guess now you have to stay.
I don't know if at this point you would like to answer some questions.
Of course.
Sorry, I left the room for a second. We have a couple of questions, but the first question would be, would you suggest we start with watching the movies or reading the books?
I think it's also a good idea to watch the movies in the original English language, of course, and probably with English subtitles. I think it's too distracting and there's not really much relation between the audio and, in this case, the text when you have subtitles in Spanish and audio in English. I think subtitles in Spanish and audio in English is what everybody used to do, like in the 80s and the 70s when we went to the movies, right? But now that we have the technology, we should try the English original audio and English subtitles, maybe later a rerun with only the English audio. And then maybe that would give us more motivation to also start reading in English.
Okay, so I hope the person who asked this question got the answer that he or she wanted. The second question that we have is, at which level could I be able to understand the original versions? I mean, the versions in English. Can I read in English if I am in basic level, or should I wait until I am an intermediate one or an advanced?
That's a very good question. It's a little difficult to answer without, I don't know, arising some suspicion or some people not liking the answer. And the Harry Potter books basically are recommended for people or little people from 8 years and over. Now, a child, an 8-year-old child, has an intermediate level of the language. If we compare, in this case, we're talking about a native speaker of the language. An American, an English child that is 8 years old has already a good command of the language, an intermediate level of the language. So I would also say that you can start reading the books without any problem or without much problem at an intermediate level.
Okay. Okay, I get it. So if I'm a native speaker, I might start around 8, 9, or 10. And let's talk about you. At what age did you start to read the Harry Potter saga? Maybe this can encourage some of us to read it. Some people might think that it's a book for kids. Maybe my secondary school students might not be interested because they are not, maybe they are an intermediate level, but they are 15, 16. Maybe this will not be interesting for them. Or if I teach at an institute or language center, if my students are young adults, would they be interested in this story, or is this just a story for kids? without meaning that justice, I mean, demeaning the content of the book, on the contrary.
Of course. I think there's always a genre in movies, in books, or movies or books that are intended to entertain people. For example, we can talk about the Marvel superhero movies. Some people might say, no, those are not serious movies. You are never going to give an Oscar award to a Marvel superhero movie. So if you are an adult and you have an intermediate command of the language or an advanced command of the language, I guarantee you're going to be entertained by the book, because the sense of humor of the books is much higher than the ones in the movies. They're filled with different images, with different gags, the relationships, the fights between the different characters. In my case, for example, it took me back to my time in high school, like memories. Oh, I remember something similar happened to me. So even if you're an adult, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, I started reading the books in my 30s, and I, like I said, they were really entertaining. I felt I was also expanding my English, my fluency at reading. So it has many purposes, really, to read these books.
All right, so if you allow me to switch back to Spanish now, si no tenemos un dominio intermedio o avanzado del idioma, el libro de todas maneras va a ser una fuente de diversión, de entretenimiento y, ¿por qué no?, de conexión con uno, porque como mencionas, puede evocar recuerdos o puede de repente asociarse con experiencias que estamos viviendo si tenemos la misma edad de los personajes, ¿no? Que es lo que le entendí, lo que te entendí, José. Entonces, ya sea que nosotros tengamos el nivel intermedio o avanzado y deseemos leer la versión en inglés, o estemos en la etapa inicial del idioma, lo leamos en español, y luego podamos regresar a las películas, ver las diferencias y disfrutar ambas. En mi opinión, ambas son obras maestras, son películas muy bien logradas, ¿no? En los libros, obviamente que tú eres el especialista, pero una prueba de lo grande que es esta historia es la cantidad de clubes de fans que hay en Lima, que hay en el Perú y que hay en el mundo. La cantidad de las millones de personas que están asociadas o suscritas a la página Wizarding World para saber a qué casa pertenecen, por ejemplo. Todos esos detalles nos dicen el entusiasmo que nosotros podemos crear en clase, sugiriendo a nuestros alumnos que lean la saga, y no lo vamos a hacer solamente diciéndoles lean, sino como has hecho tú hoy día, compartiendo, ¿no?, con los ojos que brillan estos detalles de algo que nos ha gustado, que nos ha emocionado y de lo que nos gusta hablar, porque algo que hace el lector es siempre busca a alguien con quien hablar de la emoción que siente del libro que lee. Nosotros el día martes empezamos con una semana que es muy importante, y este es el preámbulo de nuestra semana cultural. En la semana cultural vamos a hablar de libros, vamos a hablar de cultura, y con José decíamos, presentamos la noche de Harry Potter en la semana cultural o lo hacemos el mismo día. Y apenas ayer decidimos hacerlo hoy, porque hoy es la noche de Harry Potter y la próxima semana vamos a continuar hablando de libros. ¿Qué es la Semana Cultural? Por primera vez, el Centro de Idiomas, en coordinación con la oficina de rectorado de la Universidad Ricardo Palma, está organizando 4 días de conferencias presenciales. En estas conferencias nosotros vamos a hablar de la cultura inglesa, de la cultura francesa, vamos a escuchar sobre la literatura de nuestro país y vamos a terminar el día viernes con un evento sumamente importante para nosotros, que es la entrega de certificados de nivel avanzado a nuestros estudiantes de quechua. El 8, las sesiones van a ser en línea. Todas las sesiones del 8 al 11 van a ser transmitidas en vivo a través de este canal, del canal de Facebook, de nuestro canal de YouTube, de la página de Facebook de la Universidad Ricardo Palma, y yo los invito a reencontrarnos con los protocolos de seguridad y con el aforo limitado el día 9, 10 y 11 en el Corihuasi, que en mi opinión es uno de los lugares culturales más hermosos de Lima. Vamos a escuchar el día miércoles a 𝗕𝗢𝗢𝗏 hablar de literatura inglesa. Vamos a tener la alegría de escuchar a la profesora Andrea Cárdenas hablar de cultura francesa en base a su experiencia como estudiante de magíster en Francia. Luego vamos a tener el día jueves al doctor Iván Rodríguez Chávez. Vamos a tener a Jessica Rodríguez, una escritora peruana, y a Carlos Garayar, también escritor peruano, y los tres en un conversatorio sobre literatura peruana. El día viernes vamos a tener al doctor Roberto Reyes Tarazona hablando también de literatura peruana, y vamos a terminar con la fantástica Jessica Montes, quien nos contará sobre su experiencia en publicación en lengua quechua, y terminaremos con una narración en quechua. Los invito a inscribirse en la página, en el formulario, así como lo han hecho hoy día para el sorteo, que vienen apenas 2 minutos. Vamos a inscribirnos para poder confirmar si deseamos asistir a 1, 2 o a las 3 sesiones, o a 4 o a 5. Son 6 eventos. Cada uno de estos eventos entrega para los estudiantes de pregrado de la Universidad Ricardo Palma un certificado que es válido para su trámite de grado. Esa consulta nos la han estado haciendo. Y si no necesitas el certificado y solamente por el placer de reencontrarte con nuestra cultura o de aprender más de la cultura francesa e inglesa o de la cultura peruana y su literatura, te invitamos a que nos acompañes estos días, ya sea a través del streaming o de forma presencial. Va a ser un honor y una alegría encontrarnos esos días. Regresamos con el profesor porque quisiera que nos muestre el premio del sorteo. Lo tiene usted a la mano, nos contó. Ahí está, perfecto. Profesor. Muchas gracias. Entonces le hacemos un zooming, Erika, al profesor Castro. Los 3 libros, y nos ayuda con los títulos. El primer título es...
Aquí están los 3 libros en inglés, ojo, porque estos sí son, si no me equivoco, versión inglesa. Los 3 están en inglés, y digo que es versión inglesa porque dice Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, o la piedra filosofal. La versión americana se llama The Sorcerer's Stone. Les contaba que la versión americana o la edición americana tiene obviamente la adaptación de la ortografía y también la adaptación del título, el único título adaptado para Estados Unidos, que es Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Este es Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, y finalmente el tercer libro, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Los 3 libros en inglés para un solo afortunado.
Excelente. Entonces, les voy a comentar que en este momento estamos cerrando el enlace y que contamos con 73 personas que estamos seguras van a disfrutar, bueno, el ganador o ganadora va a disfrutar de los 3 libros en idioma original. Vamos con el sorteo. Gracias, Erika, por apoyarnos con el backstage, con la logística del evento. Vamos a esperar que salga la ruleta con los nombres. Como se menciona en el formulario, les estamos pidiendo al ganador o ganadora que se acerque a Corihuasi en uno de estos 3 días. De lo contrario, podemos coordinar el envío dentro de Lima. Y está, el sonido está, Erika. Me parece que no. Tenemos 72, 73 personas y perfecto, ahora sí. Y le hacemos un screen a Rosa Noelia Cóndor y a 𝗪𝗛. Te vamos a pedir, Rosa, que compartas, por favor, a través de cualquiera de los canales del Centro de Idiomas, nuestro número de WhatsApp, 920-442348, o a través de nuestro correo electrónico o del inbox de Facebook o mensaje de Instagram, tu número de DNI. Con tu nombre y tu número de DNI podemos coordinar la entrega en Corihuasi. Y yo quisiera felicitar particularmente las intervenciones de Marco Antonio Medina Rivera, de Brenda Naya y de Ale Panda, que nos han hecho recordar muchas cosas con sus comentarios y nos han hecho la exposición mucho más divertida. Muchas gracias a los tres. Profesor, muchísimas gracias, José, por estar el día de hoy con esta presentación. El profesor quería que todo se desarrolle en inglés, sin embargo, bueno, el sorteo lo hemos hecho en español. Para el próximo sorteo también va a ser en inglés. Quisiera terminar contándoles que la próxima semana, en cada sesión en vivo, vamos a hacer al final de la sesión, al igual que hoy, un sorteo entre los inscritos con títulos de la universidad y títulos de literatura peruana. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Gracias, José, te felicito. Gracias a todos. Que tengan buena noche.